How the pyramids were built. This is one of the history's most ancient and unsolved puzzles that baffle the minds of many scholars and scientists throughout the history. The Great Pyramids were the only standing ancient world wonder lasting 4,500 years. These gigantic structures were made with 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing between 2 to 15 tons. All the stone blocks are perfectly fitted that you can't even fit a paper between the blocks. Also, the sides of the pyramids were perfectly aligned along the cardinal points. That's precision and planning. But who built this and how did they do that? There are many conspiracy theories that some believe that they were built by the aliens, while others believe that they were built by the slaves. So let's find out who actually built the pyramids. Recently, tombs of Egyptian builders were found near Giza. The tombs are 9 feet shafts, each has dozen skeletons of the pyramid builders. Hawass, an Egyptian archaeologist who worked on this, said, "Nowhere would they have been buried so honorably if they were slaves." The skeletons found in a fetal position, the head pointing to the west and the feet to the east. According to the ancient Egyptian beliefs, the skeletons were perfectly preserved along with jars of beer and bread for their afterlife. These skeletal studies showed that they had high levels of meat for their diet. These supporting the evidence that slaves did not build the ancient monuments but were actually built by the people of Egypt who were highly skilled. These evidences only gives the idea of who built the pyramids. But there's another question that baffles the minds of everyone. How did they build the pyramids? First, as we know, you can't build a pyramid on the sand. Sand is unstable, it shifts, it moves, so they cleared it down to the bedrock. Now, how does one level an area of 13.5 acres? The prevailing theory is that they dug channels and filled water with it. Whenever the water would run out, one would know that it's lower than the rest of the base. Careful studies on the Great Pyramid's base show that the base never varies by more than 2 inches over 13.5 acres. That's precision and great workmanship. Now, the foundations are leveled. How did they bring all those blocks to the site? Well, they didn't have to bring a lot of them to the site. The quarries were right around the pyramid. One can walk and see the quarries to this day. So, a lot of stonework in the pyramid comes from right around it. The finest limestone for the casing, but that smooth outer surface did come from further up. But how the ancient Egyptians managed to get the blocks averagely weighing 2.5 tons to the pyramids? The arguable answer is using the Nile in bringing the blocks. But the Nile River is miles away from the pyramid construction. It's impossible to transport such gigantic blocks through miles. Then, how did they do that? Well, a recent study of fossil pollen grains found in the sediments around Giza showed them about the history of the Khufu branch. Khufu branch of the Nile River once ran so close to Giza that it could have been used to carry the stones that were used to build the pyramids. So blocks were floated across the Nile branch and hauled into place. But moving the blocks in the desert was a greater challenge. The dry sand increases the friction and makes it impossible to move the block. Then, how did the ancient Egyptians were able to overcome this? The obvious answer lied in atom art, discovered in the 19th century. Journeying through the desert made easier by wetting the sand to a perfect ratio. Wetting the sand to 3 to 5% to its total volume makes the block to overcome the friction. This is a greater science that the ancient people surprisingly know about. But that only explains how the stones got from one location to another. The height of the Great Pyramid is 480 feet. How did the ancient Egyptians raise those gigantic blocks to such height? Researchers in Egypt discovered a 4,400-year-old RAN system. The RAN system dates at least as far back as the region of Par of Khufu. The ramp carved unusually into the ground that hinted at some surprisingly advanced technological achievement. For one thing, it was pretty steep, but more significantly, it was flanked on both sides by staircases. These stairs were marked with recurring holes that could have contained wooden posts. The patterns of the post holes in the stairs suggested a particular kind of rope and pulley system. Once a stone block reached its desired level, wooden rockers may have been used to maneuver it into position. The blocks raised obviously with this technique. The weight of the 2.3 million blocks is around 5.9 million tons. Proofs that doesn't crack with such weight about them. How did they manage to overcome this now? Well, they used a technique called corbelling. Steps going inward, 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 and all the way to the top of the ceiling. But when you go into this burial chamber, there's no corbelling. It's big slabs of granite going across the top. Why don't they crack? It's got the whole weight of the pyramid above it. Khufu found an interesting solution to this problem. It's revealing chambers. If you can get above the burial chamber, there's a tiny chamber called the revealing chamber. It's really small. You will have to crawl and crouch. It's a chamber that's about maybe 4 feet high and that takes some of the pressure off the ceiling. Above that, there's another revealing chamber, and above, there's another revealing chamber, all the way on the top. Above the revealing chambers are two huge blocks of stones forming a triangle, an inverted triangle like a pyramid. That takes the pressure off the revealing chambers, so all the force of the weight of the pyramid is distributed throughout the pyramid, away from the ceiling. Now you know how they build these massive structures. Pyramids were undoubtedly the greatest human engineering ever. Precision, alignment, and planning of the pyramids shows that our ancient civilization had mastered in many things like architecture, engineering, astronomy, art, and many. So, we can't just credit any others in making this marvel. Pyramids were the only standing ancient world wonder till today. Shows how a perfect work can withstand hindrances over time. Ancient techniques and technology were pretty much simpler than the modern day, but were pretty much effective. Shows how people in the past had better knowledge than we possess today.